Welcome to the Center in the City podcast. I'm your host, Wade Brill, and during this series, I'll be interviewing various thought leaders, wellness experts, and humans on how they practice sustainable self-care and mindfulness. We'll get real and raw, talk about the light and the shadow side of self-care and mindfulness, and how we can actually stay centered amid the chaos and the hustle and bustle of our modern day world. So settle in and get centered. This podcast episode is brought to you by Centered in the City, a virtual on-demand self-care and mindfulness platform with different meditations, journaling prompts, nourishing recipes, and Pilates flows, all designed to support you feeling calm, focused, and energized as you live your life in this modern day world. For more information, head on over to centeredinthecity.com and claim your 7-day free trial. Welcome back to the Centered in the City podcast. My name is Wade Brill, and I am so glad you are here. I know there are tons of podcasts and audios you could be listening to right now, so I truly just want to take a moment to share my gratitude for entering your ears, your heart, your mind. On today's solo episode, I want to explore the power of decision making. There's a common theme that arises in a lot of client sessions, and it's something, to be honest, that I have managed as well in my life. I think this is also a very timely podcast episode because as we start to step into summer, this is a time that is filled with a lot of planning, decision making. Should I go on this trip? Should I not? Do I do this? Do I go to this? Do I do the happy hour? We can lose ourselves in the sauce of busyness if we aren't conscious of our decision making. The actions we take, the decisions we make really affect our energy. So today we're going to talk about 5 ways that we can bring some insight and awareness to our decision-making process to make it feel more smooth and to support us staying in alignment with what matters most to us. So let's settle into this episode and let's get centered. Getting caught in decision making is a really common place that people can get stuck, especially if you are somebody who tends to have some perfectionism, high achieverness, and even some people-pleasing tendencies. Oh, let's also not forget some anxious attachment qualities as well. I use these descriptors because I think people are getting really good at and used to self-diagnosing themselves through people sharing on TikTok and Instagram and other social media platforms when they call out these kind of psychological characteristics. And these sort of patternings, not that I think we need to box ourselves in as, I am an anxious attachment person or I am perfectionist, right? I think we can be really careful about too overly identifying ourselves with a label. However, these modes of operation, when we act through the lens of perfectionism or people-pleasing or anxious attachments, we are acting outside of ourselves. It's coming from a different operating system than our true, higher, wiser self. So on the pod, we're going to explore 5 different mindsets to explore that can help you come back to yourself, can help you come back to your center so that you can make a decision in alignment with who you truly are, not from those places of anxiety, but from your inner place of wisdom so that you can make decisions that light you up and help you lead the life you want to live. So this first mindset practice is to use expansive thinking. What do I mean by that? Typically something I see a lot within my coaching, and I have this within myself as well, is this tendency to do what's called black or white thinking. It's a form of a thinking trap, which means it is a pattern in our thinking that is very limited. When we think in black and white, we're thinking in this or that, either or. We create this dichotomy that there has to be one right answer. It's this or that. And when we hold every decision as this moment, like I have to choose the right choice, the capital right choice, right? If we're feeling the perfectionism, or I have to choose the right choice that's going to make this person happy, or I have to choose from a place of not wanting to disappoint somebody, or I have to choose the right choice, otherwise this person's going to leave me or abandon me or break up with me, or my boss will get mad at me, or I'll be excluded. And as social beings, it makes sense. Like, we want to be accepted in our communities. But when we are constantly feeding this pattern that we need to make decisions from this place of fear, then we lose sight of what we actually want. And we create this cycle where we're staying in this thinking trap of right or wrong, good or bad. So when we activate this expansive thinking, we actually get to see life on a spectrum. So for instance, I was in a session a few weeks ago and a client was negotiating a contract. She just got a new job and she was negotiating a contract, and it, for a moment in our session, was, do I take the job or not, right? It was this yes or no conversation, which felt very limiting and constricting for her. But when we activated this expansive thinking through coaching, through dialogue, through exploration, she actually got to understand that it's not just a yes or a no, that she has negotiation power. And once we started to explore what would make it a yes, this many of vacation days and this much of a signing bonus, and, negotiate this non-compete off, it became an expansive way to look at a decision-making process. And it made her feel so much more empowered of like, oh yeah, I am in the driver's seat of my life. I can make these choices. When it even comes to relationships and decision making, asking ourselves, is this the right person for me or not, right? We get into very much this black and white conversation, this yes or no. But life is complicated and layered. So how do we think it's actually feasible to just boil down decision making to these blanket yeses and nos? So when it comes to your next decision point, whatever it is, whether it's do I order a burger or pasta, right? Give yourself some expansive space. Oh, maybe there's an opportunity to order the burger and get a side of pasta. And maybe that feels like a perfect balance. We get to remember that life can be expansive and abundant into what we say yes to. The second mindset practice when making decisions is to ask ourselves this really powerful question. Like, if you can start to ask yourself this question in many different situations in your life, you will see a tremendous change, not only in the outcomes, but in your relationship to honoring your own voice and your own self. When we're exploring making a decision, maybe there's many options, maybe there's just one option or two options. What can be really helpful is to ask ourselves, what's the need that you're searching for? Like, what is the best case scenario, the need, the want that you have from this decision-making outcome? We can't always control the outcome of our decisions, but if we can understand, what do we actually want? What do we need from this outcome? It can help us move in that direction. So for instance, if you're exploring, like, where do I want to move next or live next? Taking that time to pause and think about the options that you have. Maybe it's that you want to move closer to family, or you want to move to a different city that feels more aligned to who you are or what you enjoy, or you want to move closer to friends or to the country or to city life, right? Getting clear on what you want, what that ideal is, and then asking yourself, if I had that, right? If I had that ability to be closer to a beach because water is really nourishing for me, what would that do for you? And allow yourself to really sit with the outcome of that answer, and then even ask, okay, well, maybe, that would do for me is I would feel a lot calmer, and I would feel more connected to my spirituality, and I would spend weekends playing with my family on the beach. And then you can ask yourself, so if you have that, then what? And again, pause and notice what comes up for you. Okay, I would have a rhythm of a lifestyle that really suits my needs right now. And if you had that, then what? And you can keep going through this inquiry, mindful inquiry process to understand so that the decision making isn't just, I am, putting something random into Google, or I'm spinning my finger on an atlas and choosing a spot. It's that we're really getting down to your core desires within your decision-making process. And it helps make a place of maybe too many options feel a lot more clear. A third mindset practice, which is similar to our second one, but it's very different. The third practice is to live and make decisions through your value system. I talk about values a lot on this podcast. I do a lot of values-based work with my coaching clients. When we know our values and we can see how we're living our values or how we make decisions with our values, it creates so much alignment. And a lot of the time when we feel disconnection from ourselves, it's because we're not living in alignment with our values. So for instance, you get a job offer or you're exploring applying to different roles, and one of your values is health. And so you want to think about, what job actually feels like it supports my health and well-being? What supports this lifestyle that I want to be creating and living? So for this decision-making mindset practice, get to know your values, understand your values, get curious about what they actually mean, not just how you would read the definition in a dictionary, but what do they mean to you? What does your value of honesty mean, or your value of creativity or integrity mean to you? And then get clear on how those values get to help you make decisions. It's not always easy, but it becomes this compass that helps point you in the right direction. And more importantly, your right direction, not capital TH, the right direction. The fourth mindset practice here, which is also an embodied practice, is managing the trifecta of the head, the heart, and our gut. A lot of the time when you hear people talk about decision making, you hear them say, listen to your gut, use your gut. And for some people, using and tuning into their gut is really helpful, and they have that sharp connection to it, and that helps them make decisions every time, or 90% of the time, that they feel really good about or good enough. But I also have clients who are very heady, who spend a lot of their time in their head making analytical decisions based off of data and inputs and analyzing the situation, which can have its benefits to a certain place. But sometimes when we constantly are making decisions based off of numbers and data, doesn't really paint a full picture. Not to say it's not important, but it doesn't paint a full picture. And there's some people that are really attuned to their heart and emotions, and we make emotional decisions as a lot of humans. Sometimes, for instance, we buy the car that we want to buy because of an emotional response versus what actually makes sense based on economics and gas mileage and monthly payments and all the things that we think about when buying a car. We get emotionally attached to something and we say, what, let's just do it and we'll figure it out. So when we make decisions, it can be helpful depending on who you are and what decision-making center you feel most connected to, is to think about, where am I making this decision from? Am I making it from the head? Am I making it from the heart? Am I making it from my gut? And what does it look like to respond to the decision from all places, from the head, from the heart, and from the gut? Do you get the same response? Do you get a different response with your head than you do with your heart, than you do with your gut? For me, when I've done this exercise, I've gotten different responses with my head, my heart, and my gut, and it can lead to analysis paralysis. However, if I catch myself starting to head into analysis paralysis, it's normally because I'm getting so sucked into this belief that I need to make a right decision. So when I can let go of that conversation of there being a right decision and really take this widened view of, what does my head say? What does my heart say? What does my gut say? It gives me information. And from that place of information, I then can start to cut through and make a more clear decision. In my personal experience, I do believe our gut knows best, because I think it's this place of wisdom that balances both the head and the heart, so that we're not being reactive based off of numbers and rationalization of a situation, and we're not being reactive based off of our emotions, but the gut is coming from a more grounded place of just this inner sense of yes. This fifth mindset around decision making is kind of a two-part, but they're very much entangled. One of the most common blocks that comes up for my coaching clients is this lack of self-trust. And the lack of self-trust is really rooted in a lot of the anxiety that's present, a lot of the anxiety and the overwhelm. It's like this lack of self-trust of I can handle it, I can figure it out. That tends to be a common theme. And through our work together, we work on building self-trust. And when there is trust, you can make a decision from that place. When there is self-trust, you can say yes, and you can do it in a more confident place versus feeling the inner wobble of anxiety. Shake your tree of foundation to say, I don't know if I trust you to make a decision. And when we kind of have that internal dialogue, it can rattle us. And so when we can rewire that conversation, we can create more trust and groundedness that, whatever I choose is going to be the fucking good enough and right answer. And trust is really hard to practice. There's a lot of leaping into faith that has to come from this practice. And not only is there some nervous system regulation and an embodied somatic work that we do to kind of feel and create trust within the body, but there's also a rewiring of our experiences so that we can actually trust our experiences and trust our inner sense of knowing. And something that can also be common here, which is why I created this kind of two-part piece, is time. When we create little short bits of time for ourselves to make decisions, it can create more of an inner wobble that disrupts the trust. And so when there's more time, more spaciousness, it gives the ability to trust and the awareness of what decision you want to make to settle. And so you're not feeling that compressed time, last minute, ticking, need to make a decision in 10 seconds, and really put people into a freeze state or even to a bigger spiral state. I will say for some people, having a time bound is helpful, right? We create a deadline so we can move things forward, and there's accountability and there's momentum. But that's more of a container that you're agreeing upon when you're creating a due date. But when you're kind of like, I have 10 seconds to make this decision, it can really shut down our wise place of thinking because the anxiety is hijacking your experience. I will say though, what I've seen with my clients is that the more they build and practice strengthening the self-trust, the more that they're able to make sharper, faster decisions in those tight time box moments. And this is a huge leadership skill, right? When you are a leader of a team, of a company, of an organization, of a family, having to make these decisions sometimes quickly are what we need. And we don't have the luxury of time to simmer in it and gather more information to become more educated about a situation. But if you can give yourself more time, I think that can offer a sense of alignment and configuration. And of course, there is a balance of, are we giving ourselves too much time that then again activates that analysis paralysis and there's no movement moving forward. What's so universal in decision making is that we all want the best outcome. However, we can't control the outcomes of life. All we have control of is our response to take that next step, to take that next action. And the uncertainty of our outcomes can be very paralyzing for people when thinking about decision making. And when you're making decisions about big shit like health protocols, do I take this medication over this medication? Do I get a second doctor's opinion? Do I do the surgery or not? It's real life shit. This is not just what do I order for dinner. When you can tap into these different mindset practices, I promise you they will open up more awareness for yourself so that you can hear and feel what you actually want to say yes to. And that will help you have some clarity to move forward. I want to acknowledge that I didn't share, go talk to a best friend or have a conversation with your coach or your therapist about it, even though, yes, that is very important. But I wanted instead to empower you to think about how you get to listen to your own wisdom first when making decisions instead of relying on external resources. I'm so curious to hear how this episode is landing for you. Which of these 5 mindset practices when making decisions resonates for you, or which one are you most excited to try next? Let me know by reaching out on Instagram at OneWade. Send me a direct message, or feel free to send me an email in the show notes below. Thank you for being here as always. If you found this episode helpful, take a moment to share it with a friend. You can even like and subscribe to this podcast. All the ways that you interact with this podcast and this episode help me tremendously. So thank you so much for being here. And until next time, stay centered.